Hey, welcome to Russell Brand Stay Free, live from Turning Point. If you don't know yet, that Turning Point is an advocacy group for young people and that we are right now at the Student Action Summit, then that is where we are. Thanks for joining us. Remember to click the link in the description. If you don't follow our channel yet, follow it now. And if you get Rumble Premium, you get additional content from all of us. I'm joined by Brandon Tatum. Round of applause for Brandon Tatum, everyone, please. Brandon, you already addressed the main stage here and you chose to talk about family values. What was it that made you address that subject? And no, just in case you don't know, Brandon Tatum is a former police officer and football player and now conservative commentator. And also you've got the internet. You're watching this on the internet. Use the internet. Brandon, why did you choose that subject?
Well, I think that God put it on my heart, man, to be honest. It's a lot of young people.
Well, hold on. You've got to take responsibility for your own ears. If you have ears and yet do not listen, how can we be responsible for that? We can't make Brandon responsible for that. This is like BLM all over again. Brandon is a police officer and a man of color. How are you going to deal with that contradiction? Now, listen.
So
you won't be surprised to learn that was a white woman.
Yeah. So hopefully she can hear me now. But I feel like God put it on my heart. Me and the wife talk about this all the time. A lot of young people in their pursuit of excellence, in their pursuit of God and pursuit of conservatism and being a part of American culture, a lot of it has to do with relationships, getting married, having children and all of that. And I felt there's a need to address those issues. Young people are lost more so now than ever before on, should I get married? Should I have children right away? And those things need to be addressed. And I feel like they should be addressed from a biblical perspective and also from an empathetic perspective. And so that's pretty much what I charge the young people with, is saying, look, don't rush into it. Make sure you're ready and willing to make the sacrifice that's necessary to be married.
Don't you reckon that a lot of the hesitance and waiting around in the culture is where you sort of fall into them traps? I can see why in Christian cultures people get married at a younger age. Firstly, because, you know, the sacrament of marriage is the only place where they're meant to be having sex. And I recognize there's some urgency for young people once them hormones kick in. Also, though, do you think that living in a cultural context that tells you that you can get what you want and that you should be pursuing ultimately your own desires acts as a kind of, I don't know, spur, Brandon, like that it's hard for people to be patient, to just be in rest and respite, particularly with the urgency of youth and particularly with a culture that's prompting them into continual action?
No, I think that in part what you said is 100% right, because there is a desire from young people, especially, you know, once upon a time I was young and I have been saved my whole life. And there's this pursuit that people do want intimacy. From the things you see on social media, from television shows, sex sales. So all the time that we're in, you know, being entertained, sex is being pushed. And younger young people desire that level of intimacy, which in my opinion pushes people to saying, look, I'd rather get married than to be at odds with God by fornicating and doing things like that. So I think there is social pressure to pursue that. But that's why I want to give young people a different perspective and say, you know, not avoid the social pressure, but diagnose the social pressure in a way that helps you make the right decision for your future and not be, I guess, compulsive about marriage and relationships.
Brandon, just yesterday, I heard someone say you can't be intimate without being still. You know, like be still and know that I am God. How do you think that people will achieve the kind of intimacy that you're describing without the peace and stillness that only comes with a relationship with our loving creator? And also, mate, do you really, hand on heart, believe it's possible to replicate the kind of intimacy that people are chasing on the OnlyFans or with the pornography and the masturbation and with the endless hookups and the hookup apps? Do you think that kind of intimacy can be achieved outside of sexual contact?
1,000%. I mean, if everybody, well, here we go. Hear me out. If people are genuine about their experiences with being sexually active before marriage, hooking up in the hookup culture, if you're honest about it, it leaves you feeling empty. It leaves you feeling broken. All of these broken relationships and people arguing and bickering, and all of those things are a result of not doing things the right way. Ask me how I know.
Yeah, how do you know?
It's not because I read it in a book. It's because I know from personal experience.
When? How? How do you know it? When was your experience of it?
Oh, from the age of, and I hope my wife got to cover her ears, from the age of about 16.
Not if she's like that woman, couldn't hear bleeding things being amplified all over the building.
From the age of about 16 to when I got saved, and I still wasn't perfect, but I had experienced what it's like to be without, the direction from God, being without having some type of restriction on how I decided to be intimate with other people, outside of the way God had ordained it. Because you can do it, it's fun for people to do it, but it does not leave you feeling as fulfilled as if you do it in a marriage and you do it the way God has called us to do it.
That requires some either discipline or faith or both. And we live in a kind of faithless culture that's lacking in discipline. Given that this turning point event focusing on young people is now no longer an activist group geared towards getting young people to vote, because you got Trump in office now for the next few years at least. How do you think the focus of a group like Turning Point should shift to meet the new cultural, social and political goals? And if I might ask, what role do you think you have? Because you seem somewhat unique in this space, just glancing around. You're young, you're not white, you're pretty well put together and everything. Do you feel like that you have a personal obligation that's connected to your identity, or do you think it's a broad and general mission that's not connected to your previous as a police officer, as a footballer, and as a man of color?
Well, Russell, you asked a whole bunch of different questions. I'm gonna try to get to them methodically.
Chop them all up.
So we'll
play
start,
by play.
Yeah, we'll start with Turning Point USA. I think that Turning Point USA's mission and objective is not necessarily just for voting specifically. I think it's to get young people to understand what conservative values are, what freedom is, love for country, and getting themselves to a higher, I would say, mindset. Not necessarily. Let me put it like this: as we grow and develop by listening to things that we hear from speakers, from our peers, from understanding the values of America, how it was founded, I think that creates a different mentality in young people that will cause them to vote the correct way. I don't think Turning Point is trying to tell you got to vote for this president or this one. It's learning about America, the history of America, valuing capitalism, that will necessitate how you choose who you want to vote for. So I think that Turning Point does an incredible job at raising up generations of people that are more intelligent. And when you're intelligent, you make intelligent decisions. As far as me and I'm concerned, I think that every American should have the obligation to uphold American values and try to pass that information forward. As a black man, there's not a lot of black people here, obviously. And one reason is because, a lot of young black people are too afraid to speak out.
There's some people there. Them two ladies, I believe, are black.
I got three.
That lady's of Asian descent. Right, we're going to need a genetic test from everyone in the building. Yeah.
So, but I think that it's more young black people like myself and others, and it's not exclusive to black, but young black people like myself and others need to speak out, need to be bold about our convictions and not be afraid of being alienated from family members or being alienated on social media as sellouts and Uncle Toms. And the more that we do this, the more young black people can see, well, there are black people in the movement that look like me, that come from the same background that I come from. Maybe, just maybe, I can think outside the box and have a difference of opinion, or at least hear a different side.
Presumably then, you think that a Democrat appeal to young black people and the appeal that the Democrats make fundamentally to be the party of non-white people, i.e., just one example, Joe Biden, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Do you think that is a bogus and disingenuous claim?
Well, I keep saying 1,000%, but
it's all right though. It's good for emphasis. And if you do think it, then why do you think it?
Yeah, I think that the Democrat Party, not necessarily just the Democrat Party, but the leftist ideology itself is weaponizing empathy and victimizing people that then lead them to feel as if they're being rescued by that same party or that same political ideology. There has been nothing that the left has done in history, in my opinion, that have benefited minorities. It has only been them, I guess, creating conflict and situations that they then have to try to rescue people from. And the reason I say that is because you look at any violent area, or the most violent cities in the United States of America are run by who? Democrats. If you look at go back to the KKK, Go back to the Civil Rights Movement. Go back to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. The Democrat Party wasn't in support of those things. It always had been the Republican Party. The first black politicians were Republicans. The Republicans fought against the Democrats to end slavery. The KKK, the Ku Klux Klan that they tout today were the political arm of the Democrat Party. So when you look at the history of the Democrat Party all the way up until this point, and the leftist ideology have never been fruitful for black people. And getting that message out to as many people as we can will cause a change. And I think Donald Trump, in his administration and his campaigning, we have seen an incredible difference. He's got more of the black male vote than just about any other Republican in history. And we see it in the Latino community, in minority communities. And I think that he's done a good job because of those principles.
That's interesting because it seems like there's a lot of unquestioned myths there. Sometimes when I think about the civil rights leaders in your country of half a century ago, I know that they are often pretty spiritually grounded people, like, Christian pastors or devout Muslims, that it's more likely that a spiritual perspective will change America for the better rather than a particular political perspective, because you can't have politics without a firm ideology, and you can't have a firm ideology without God. How do your own spiritual values inform your own broadcasting, streaming, and activism, and your own content creation? And if you find, and this is question 2, I'm doing these questions with layers. The second part of the question is, if you do agree that spirituality, and in particular in your case, Christianity, are the primary ideological drives, what do you do if any political party, including the Republicans, appears to renege on them values?
A wonderful, wonderful question. Everything that I am, everything that I will be, comes down to my faith and belief in God. If I did not believe in God, I would not be here today. And I believe that if somehow I had a level of success, it would be undeserved if I did not give God the credit. My character, integrity, vision, purpose, everything comes from God. If there were a political party that decided to renege on the promises to uphold religious freedom and allow us to, as Christians, to be able to pray, worship, acknowledge Christ, then Christians have to abandon that party, have to abandon that political ideology, because the first and most important thing for every Christian in America is putting Christ first. Not a political ideology, not a political party, not being cool with your friends, not being liked, not being accepted by the masses. It's to put Christ first. Because if you deny Christ before man, when it comes to you being judged by the Father, Christ will deny you. And I want every Christian to understand that. You have to put your faith first.
Do you think sometimes faith in God gets parasited or hijacked by cultural ideas? Yes, evidently on the left, but maybe beyond that. Say, when we think about them Paris Olympics, that weird, chaotic bewilderment of that ceremony that seemed designed solely to blaspheme. That's like an obvious, evident example of desecration and blaspheming to destroy the values at the core of our culture in order to create a chaos from which other, I believe, satanic interests can benefit. Do you see it elsewhere in a more casual way? The worship of products, the worship of sex, the worship of wealth, all false idols. And don't you feel that in worshiping any political figure, you are ultimately worshiping a fallible, transient being who really is just at the same level as any of us, even if they are great?
I agree. We should not uphold or worship or give honor to any man that is owed to God. One of the things that I think is incredibly important is that some of our biggest issues come from within the church. It's not outside of the church. The biggest issues is that we have people that stand in the pulpit and will not preach the truth of God. We have people that will stand in the pulpit and then allow a society to fall off the map, and they're only worried about your tithe and offering. They're only worried about the size of their ministry than telling the truth, even if it hurts. Loving people truly is not lying to them. If a person is in sin, you tell them that they're in sin, but you love them to Christ. You don't lie to them about their sin and tell them that everything is acceptable in God's sight. And I think that's the biggest sin, not necessarily what the world is doing. What the world is doing is what the world is going to always do. What the church does is going to be the determining factor of how well do Christians function in a society like this? There's never going to be a society without sin. The only difference is how are the Christians going to respond in that society?
Yeah, I suppose the same way there won't be a society without sin because there's not a human being without sin.
True.
But maybe there's a difference between that and a culture that seems to celebrate sin. Hey, recently, Brandon, I was in Rome, and when I was there, I see some works of art that were about the devotion of early Christians. The one I'm thinking of is Caravaggio's paintings of Saint Matthew, and like, you see Matthew like getting pointed at and like, oi, you're in the crew. Then you see him writing out the gospel with Gabriel over him. Then you see him getting flayed alive for his beliefs and faith. Now, given this was in the city of Rome, we ain't that far from the Vatican. And I thought, you know, if we were worshipping the Lord, on the back of what you were just saying there, you're saying that from the pulpit, people ain't backing it up enough with the proper minerals of a holy man with a holy faith. If like, even with like the institution of the Vatican and well-established churches in your country, America, Christians aren't behaving like a radical revolutionary movement whose sole duty is to prepare and make straight the way for the return of our Savior, Jesus Christ, how can Christianity flourish? And wouldn't that look pretty radical? And on the back of that question, part two, don't you feel a personal obligation to strive for a kind of sainthood, knowing what that might cost you? Or are you happy just to sort of like roll along as a merry little Christian?
I love that question. You know, it's very difficult for us, even myself, because if you look at the story of Christianity, you look at the story of the apostles, it wasn't a pretty story. It wasn't a story of uploading quotes, biblical quotes on Instagram and looking holier than thou. It was a story of a struggle and a people who believed so much, they believed all the way to death. I'm really concerned, and I have to look at myself in the mirror first, that if we face persecution like those who served in the Bible, will we be able to stand up? How many people are willing to get rid of their luxuries, to face imprisonment, potentially death by torture in order to uphold Jesus Christ? Some people won't even say the name of Jesus or be a Christian in front of their friends. So it's concerning that we have been in a society where people are being too comfortable. It's this casual Christianity that's a problem. But what I will say, that's not an indictment to everybody that's sitting here, because we're all imperfect. And if you strive, God is willing to forgive you and willing to restore you if you pursue the truth. But I think that we're in trouble. It's almost as if when you go to Africa and you go to some of these other developing countries, they have more of a zeal and a connection to the true faith in God than a lot of people here in America. Because today, being a Christian means I go to church every Sunday. Being a Christian means I'm a part of this religious group and I do this every day. Instead of saying I have a relationship because I have knowledge of what the gospel of Jesus Christ really is.
Brandon, thank you very much for joining us. Round of applause for Brandon Tatum, everyone. We're going to take a quick break. Jenna, do we have commercials and stuff? We're going to have a quick commercial break now before our next guest comes out. Thanks for joining us live on Rumble, on Russell Brand Stay Free. Remember, if you get Rumble Premium, you get additional guests. Hey, where should people follow you to get access to your content?
The Officer Tatum, THE, Officer Tatum, on every platform, you'll find me there.
Every single one. That's not including OnlyFans, because he's a man of God. God bless you. Thanks for joining us. This is a quick commercial break. We'll be back in a moment. Hello and welcome back to Stay Free with Russell Brand and with Jack Pacific. Please give us a round of applause. Hey, Jack, we were just talking about how to organize a political movement. Now, I wonder, Jack, how significant the change is from when you are campaigning to get elected to when you are an advocate for a party that's already in government when it comes to shaping policy, whether that's the Maha aspect of this movement or what Charlie Kirk is so devoted to here at Turning Point. How does the objectives change and how do you remain clear? Because wouldn't you take the, and I don't know how far into it you want to get, wouldn't you take the non-disclosure of the Epstein files as an indication of things get different once you get in government, that the sword of Damocles appears above your head and suddenly you have different challenges? That means people in government have a set of challenges that we don't fully understand and aren't fully clear to us. How do people that are on the periphery of power, whether that's like you, a significant influencer, or every one of us here at Turning Point participate in? How do we ensure that government remains accountable to the ideals that got them elected?
Well, Russell, thank you so much for the opportunity to answer that question, because I was, and I think there's a few others that are here this weekend, I was one of those people who was brought in with Pam Bondi and received the binder. Remember the binder now? I call it the baloney binder because as I opened it, it turned out that's all it was full of, was just baloney. There were no actual new documents in here at all. And yet we were told, hey, this is phase one. Well, phase one would intuit phase two, phase three, phase four, etc. We didn't get any of it. In fact, we get this memo that says there's nothing. So to your point, you're right. It's very easy in a sense to be in the opposition because all you can do, you can point and you can complain and you can whine and you can criticize. It's simple. It's easy. When you're in, you must govern. When you're in, now you have the responsibility. But I always say that responsibility must be mitigated by, number one, the promises that were made before you went in. If you remember the things that you said, the commitments that you made, if you're not making the commitments and staying true to those commitments, then how are you any better? How are you any better than the people that you were previously criticizing and opposing that aren't you just becoming the thing that which you oppose? And so what I do believe is when it comes to something like Epstein, when it comes to something like Maha, you have to have those clear objectives. And the objective doesn't just mean we're going to get through today's news cycle. The objective means that we're meeting our commitments and we're making good on that as we proceed through time to the next election, to the midterms, to the next presidential. And I'll say this on Epstein, we need full disclosure, and wherever the truth goes, we must follow it.
I've heard of a number of things on that subject, from Bill O'Reilly saying that it's simply an attempt to ensure that people that may have been affiliated with Epstein aren't tarred by the more nefarious aspects of what Epstein was doing, to people claiming that Epstein did not die in that cell and is still alive and at large. And my own sort of deep and entrenched biases as a conspiracy theorist lead me to not intuit, just feel. And sometimes I have to be careful, Jack, because I start to want certain things to be true. Like I kind of want Bill Clinton to be implicated and I want Obama to be. I'd be disappointed if I found out, no, Bill Clinton's a really nice guy and he's never done anything wrong. I'd be like, no, I was looking forward to reading about him being involved in satanic rituals on Epstein Island. So I have to be careful of those biases. But my sense is that contained within those files is information that is so deep and damaging that it goes beyond the reach of any individual party, but the entire system itself.
How are we, who are sitting on the outside of politics, of government, of world affairs, how are we to understand how the American government, the British government, Prince Andrew, all right, Ehud Barak, the Prime Minister of Israel, how are we to understand how all of these governments and world affairs operate and the decisions that are made? Now, can you go to the news media? Of course you can. Can you go to social media? Sometimes. But if there are things going on behind the scenes, if there are blackmail operations, we can't possibly understand the true nature of that blackmail Who's blackmailing who? Who's got the goods, the receipts on another? Why is it that some action is taking place? Well, the politician will tell you, well, this is taking place to achieve this, this, and this, when in reality, it's because someone's got pictures, information, and by the way, one of the biggest pieces that people miss on Epstein that I think is so crucial is what was Epstein? A money manager. A money manager. He was receiving money from these highly wealthy individuals, and he was pushing the money out into different locations, different accounts, talking about, I'm managing your wealth. I'm managing your wealth. If you needed someone to run, and I say this as a prior intelligence officer, if you needed someone to send out black funds to be able to fund a black operation, what would you need? You'd need a money manager. You'd need someone who understood the art of making money travel throughout the world and go into different pockets without the wider government or without the wider financial agencies seeing this. That's exactly the service that Jeffrey Epstein could provide. Now you attach that to whatever went on this island, whatever went on these airplanes, suddenly you've got the makings of an operation that is not just potentially valuable to an intelligence agency, it would be valued to every intelligence agency.
Julian Assange said the reason that the information has not been made explicit is because if it were, it would lose its inherent value as leverage against the powerful individuals contained. If that is the case, and I sort of just generally trust Julian Assange because of everything he's been through, how do you feel as someone that's openly advocated and campaigned for this administration, that's pretty closely connected to this administration, that's publicly backed senior members of the government? Do you feel compromised? Do you feel like, oh, well, at least it's better than the Democrats? Do you feel that there needs to be significant evolution in the way this country is run? Do you think it's an indication that there's a requirement for systemic and institutional change, that without which you're going to get some form or rendering of this centralized corruption, regardless of who populates the roles within power? Does it make you feel disheartened?
Well, I'll put it this way. I know what it looks like when the government wants to investigate something. I saw the way that, and I mentioned this on stage, that the January 6 participants were treated. Right? We saw what the government can do when the full force and full scope of the power of the federal government is brought to bear. And when they went after the Jan 6ers, people, little old ladies who were waving a flag or praying on the steps of the Capitol, it didn't matter where you were in the country. It didn't matter where you were in the world. You were getting a knock on the door. You were getting a raid in the middle of the night. You were getting your finances frozen. You were getting your communications sucked up. You were getting all the rest of it. And Russell, I haven't seen any of that with this Jeffrey Epstein client list, the Jeffrey Epstein network. I haven't seen any public hearings or public trials. I don't even have the number up. It was thousands of people. Thousands of people were rolled up over January 6th. They've all been pardoned now, every single one of them. And yet the only two people who were ever arrested for Jeffrey Epstein were Epstein himself and now Ghislaine Maxwell. Even Prince Andrew is now free to travel again on the basis of this report. And I say it's not good enough.
Oh, mate, I'm a little bit freaked out by that. There's two things you've said. One is how easily infatuated we are and distracted we are by the news cycle, the ever-churning news cycle. And I'd not considered that when a government is seriously undertaking to resolve a matter, doors get kicked down and people get arrested. So
you remember COVID?
Right. Yeah, they can enforce power. Immersive messaging, total control, arrests, changing laws, when not changing laws, regulating through near mandate. All right, that's pretty interesting. Okay, so that sort of suggests to me that you, like I do, believe that there is some degree of suppression and distraction taking place with this matter. How do you reckon the role of people that are not within government but have been supportive of government changes now that we're in this position and this condition? Take, for example, Maha. The Maha, I suppose, is the movement that's generally affiliated with health and food of Americans, and perhaps you might say in particular young people, as pertains to big food and big pharma and big agriculture. What type of direction do you think the activism has to take with regard to those issues? Because I think in the instance of Maha and the HHS, I think Dr. Oz is fantastic. I love Robert Kennedy. I love Jay Bhattacharya, Mai Makari, Callie and Casey Means. Seems like there's really good people there. So what is it that they face that's perhaps a less glamorous and incandescent version of Epstein, but nonetheless represents a nexus of interest?
What you're talking about, right? It's the interest, in this case, hopefully not any blackmail, but corporate interests. And at the end of the day, billions upon billions of dollars that have been made off of the backs of the health of the people. They say, well, the food is cheaper, the food is cheaper, the food is cheaper. But guess what? It's cheaper and the companies are able to sell more of it. They're getting more of a profit because of this, but it is not healthier. It is, in fact, unhealthier. And by putting this unhealthy food into our bodies, my wife, who's just sitting over here, she's from Eastern Europe. And when she came to the United States, she was filling out her health insurance forms, and they ask her, they say, oh, what allergies do you have? Okay, so what food allergies do you have? You know what she said? She said, what's a food allergy? What is that? I've never heard of such a thing. And she said, how could you be allergic to food? How is it possible? It's that because in other parts of the world, it's not even something that enters into your consciousness that food is the source of life. There's something that you could have some sort of adverse reaction to. And that goes to speak to you that the food in this country is the thing that has the problem. It's not our bodies, it's the food that has this problem. So when it comes to and I'll get back to your question, and this is why she's so passionate about it, Tanya, that clearly defined goals and clearly defined objectives are so important. And, you know, there's so much that the government is doing on a regular basis, but because it is, you know, it could be a bit boring. You're having a meeting, you're releasing some new talking points. You need more. You need optics. You need to go to these factory farms. You need to go to big ag. You need to go to, and by the way, we see ICE is going. Again, that's big ag again. So you're going to Monsanto, you're going to the GMOs, and, you know, maybe you put the police tape up, maybe you do something. You've got to bring people on board, show them the story as you would in any, you know, narrative storytelling. Show, don't tell.
Jack, if something is as significantly warped as the food that an entire population eats in order to fulfill corporate and commercial edicts, don't the sundry and less significant issues of tribal politics pale into insignificance? The example of your wife, food has become toxic and poisonous. Yes, we have the example of allergies, but beyond that, we know that we're en masse eating food that's essentially bad for us. Aren't we being invited to reframe our entire perspective on politics and become sort of somewhat more radical and, dare I venture, somewhat more Christian, and approach these institutions as if they are kind of corrupt behemoths that have taken control of the spiritual life of our country or your country?
That's precisely how I view these behemoths. That's precisely how I view these institutions that for far long, and perhaps they were set up with the best of intentions, but they say the road to hell is paved with the best intentions. That these institutions, which were supposed to be set up to protect people, have actually become, the FDA is a perfect example of this, that have become the ones that actually prey upon people, have become the ones that turn into a revolving door of industry interests coming in with the power now of the federal government to put a stamp on anything and say, yes, this is healthy, or yes, this uses natural products, or yes, this is totally approved. When in fact, when you start digging through the labels, when you start digging through it. So I will say this, if you go back 10 years ago to now, and I always give people this rubric to use, you should use a rubric of where were we 10 years ago to now. 10 years ago, these conversations were not being had in public. 10 years ago, a man like Bobby Kennedy was laughed off the stage, was prevented from speaking publicly on so many of these issues by his own party. I would have you remember. And it was his ability to cross the aisle when he did that with Donald Trump and Donald Trump's openness to bring a scion of the Democrat Party with the most powerful name in Democrat politics, a Kennedy, to put him on stage with the MAGA-MAHA alliance that was formed. And now what they need to see going forward is the tangible, objective interests, making sure that those goals are met. I come from a military background. And with my military background, I say, look, I agree. I'm a Christian. I agree. These institutions are problematic. But with my military mind, I say, what is what we would call the desired end state? What is the commander's desired end state? And so once that's laid out, then you work backwards from that end state and figure out what your mile markers are, your milestones, your objectives, your accomplishments along the way. And then you make a plan to accomplish them.
Do you think that's how the deep state's operating continually, like the desired end state?
Yes.
The Epstein list goes away. Okay, well, say we're going to do these files, then release something, then distract people, then it goes on for a while, then the social pressures increase so much. Or COVID was like a military operation, wasn't it, in this country and in mine? Yeah, you can see that military expertise is necessarily deployed in social management and social organization. There's sort of military as we understand it at the level of warfare, there's military at the level of intelligence, and then there's military at the level of social control. I'd never thought about it before, Jack. This is a bit of a tangential question. From your talking voice, it sounds like you've got a good singing voice. Have you got a good singing voice? You sound a bit like Michael Bublé and people like that.
I'm no Russell Brand, I'll say that.
Well, I think I can detect. Like, I bet you can do like sort of schmoozy barroom songs.
I could do a little of that, a lounge act, perhaps.
Yeah, lounge stuff. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I reckon you're right about this. In somehow like a fusion of like the military planning, commitment, duty,
yes,
willingness to sacrifice. By the way, I suppose many of those values are Christian values anyway. Willingness to sacrifice, duty.
They are
ultimate Christian values. If Christ is the ultimate Christian,
well, if we are to be Christian soldiers,
yeah, then we have to be willing to sacrifice.
Yes.
Man, do you hope that people ain't gone too soft for what might be a radical and revolutionary moment?
Well, what I tell people is always remind them that our King is Jesus Christ. Keep him at the center. If you keep God and Christ as your center, you will be able to face any social pressures, because at the end of the day, at the end of all of our days, the final test is what we're all leading forward to. My little boys that are sitting down right over there, and I'm getting them ready for their final test. As we go through this universe that we go through, we will eventually be presented before those gates, and we will be brought before the throne, and God will say, he'll say to Russell, he'll say to Jack, he'll say to all of us, I gave you these gifts. I gave you these abilities. What did you use them for? Did you use them to bring people to me? And so, Russell, by the way, speaking of which, symbols I think are important. And there was a symbol that I gave you about almost 1 year ago exactly.
I know.
There's a bit of a backstory to. You passed that on. So I realized that there is a symbol that I needed to get you again.
I'm so grateful for this rosary, because I gave it
This
to my
is a
beloved friend
rosary.
Joe. Tell us the story.
And so I gave you a rosary 1 year ago when we were on this Rumble couch before in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
We're back again. You gave it on. All right. So I said, you know something? Russell needs another rosary. This one, if you look at the center, by the way, that's St. Michael the Archangel right there.
Oh, I need him. I need him when going in a battle.
The sword and shield of St. Michael the Archangel. When God needed to go into battle, to send his angels into the battle against the forces of hell, the forces of Satan, the angels that turned 1/3 of the angelic host turned against him, he sent St. Michael into battle to the fore.
I'm so grateful, because I gave this to my friend Joe, because that man's mind is a battlefield and his life is a battlefield. And I thought like that he would need it more than me. But you know, when you give someone something, you think, I don't really want to give this away. I had that feeling. Sometimes I have that.
I understand.
I love it. Thank you so much. That's such a beautiful gift. And I can feel the gentle lyricism and crooning continually in your voice. Even as you're talking about those tests and the heavenly gates, I can sort of feel like it could become at any moment a Sinatra-esque song. God bless you for giving me this beautiful gift. I love you, Jack. Thanks, man.
Back at you, Russell. Love you too, man.
The path together. A round of applause for Jack Pasavic. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have a quick commercial break now, and we might be back in a minute. I don't know. I can't tell. Who knows? See you later. We're out of here.